This is Chapter 5, Planning Projects Part 2, Presentation 2. Here are our learning objectives. These are the objectives we covered last time. And here are the objectives we're covering this time. Risk Management Plan, Procurement Management Plan, and Stakeholder Management Plan. Don't forget to download the presentation notes and the outline. This is our overall picture, our big chart from page 8 of your book. And you'll notice that we've gone through most of the items here, but in the knowledge areas, we've, in Chapter 5, covered quality, human resources, and communications. Now we're covering risk, procurement, and stakeholder management.
Best people working on projects look for the problems. So they take out their magic crystal ball and look into the future. So part of planning a project is to look at what might go right as well as wrong. So what can go right and wrong, and what can we do? People who work on projects love this. This is where their years of knowledge and experience come in, where you can focus everyone to help you be more successful. What can get in our way, and what are we going to do about it before it happens? Well, this might happen because this supplier is always late. Well, can we find a way to get rid of that supplier? This might happen because this person is not going to support the project. So how do we get around them? This might happen because this person might change what they want. So what can we do to find the change sooner than later? What are we going to do about it? Very uplifting, very empowering, very exciting. And if you were to put a title on this piece of the science of project management, we're just talking about risk management. We want to start to analyze what can go right or wrong, and then start to prioritize those. Which ones should we do something about? Which ones shouldn't we? And then simply do something to eliminate them before they start to impact you.
Risk Management Plan is basically dealing with uncertainty. The better risk manager you are, the better project manager you are. Risk is defined as an uncertainty with a negative or a positive effect on meeting the objectives. Project risk management is defined as an uncertainty with a positive or negative, and it's that positive thing that we keep forgetting about. There are actually risks that render positive results in meeting the objectives. Note that some people can only view risks as negative. That's incorrect. Some key outputs include your risk management plan, your probability/impact matrix, your risk register of all the risks that actually come about, and the risk-related contractual agreements. In other words, you're going to actually have agreements in place to mitigate some of these risks. I love that picture on the right. Talk about a risk. So what about a risk management plan? Well, a risk management plan includes procedures for managing the risks throughout the life of the project. There are general risks. Methodology for the risk management plan would be in there. There are some roles and responsibilities. In other words, people are going to watch those risks. There's going to be a budget and schedule estimates in case those things actually happen. And then there are events listed in the risk management plan that actually would be predicted. So let's cover each one of those. The risk events and probability impact matrix. Risk events are specific, uncertain events that may occur to the detriment or the enhancement of the project. As far as the negative risks go, they can be performance failures of a product. They can be delays in completing the work scheduled. They can be increases in estimated costs, or supply shortages, or litigation against the company, or strikes. So the idea is that there are a lot of different things that you can actually have that would negatively impact the project. The best way to develop these is to sit with your team and look at each aspect of the scope statement, see what would stop that from happening. In many cases, you have to rely upon the veterans of other projects to get an accurate listing. So those are the negative risks. Let's take a look at some of the positive results that may have happened. First of all, you may complete the work sooner than planned, or an unexpected reduction in cost. Collaborating with suppliers to produce better products is a good way. Obtaining good publicity from a project, which is almost unforeseen in many cases. And you can chart these probabilities and impact of the risks events on a matrix. And that's what you really want to do. That gives you the percentages and the cost in terms of money and in terms of time. What is a risk register? Well, a risk register is a document that contains the results of various risk management processes and is often displayed in a table or spreadsheet format. Go ahead and turn to page 205 of your book and you'll see one there. This is a tool for documenting potential risk events and related information, including, and I'll let you read all of those down there. One of the ways of mitigating risk is to contractualize it out. In other words, you have agreements that cover some of those risks. A contract is work done by outside suppliers or sellers, and it should be well documented. It's basically a mutually binding contract where the supplier provides specific products and services and is obligated the buyer to pay them. The project manager should include the clauses in contracts to help manage project risks by using incentives or penalty clauses, very popular. Certain types of contracts, such as fixed price contracts, help reduce the risk occurring at higher costs than expected. And of course, competition for supplying goods and services helps reduce the overall negative risk and enhance the positive risks on projects. How do we plan risk responses? If risks happen, what do we plan for? Well, in the negative category, you plan for risk avoidance. In other words, how do we not have this happen? Risk acceptance, in other words, if it's a small risk, small chance of happening, or a small cost, we may just go ahead and accept that. We may be able to transfer that risk to something else, some other company, or some other contractual agreement will allow us to transfer it. Or you may have risk mitigation where you can bring in extra forces and lessen the effect of that risk. What about the positive side? Well, the positive side was we can take a risk and exploit it, especially if that's good publicity. We may want to share the risk with another partner, another company. We may want to enhance that risk. The risk enhancement would be to make it even greater than it is. And we also want to plan for risk acceptance, which means it just happens and it's there. Go ahead and take a look at the guidelines on page 207. Procurement management is one of those very visible areas. Basically, it's acquiring or procuring goods and services for a project from outside the organization. As the business world continues to become more competitive and more global, you're going to see more and more projects offshored, or in other words, outsourced. Now, when you do that, there are several different types of contracts, some of which are in your favor, some of which are in the company's or the contractor's favor. So as we go through this, a fixed price or lump sum contract involves giving the contractor a fixed price for a well-defined product and service. This works really well with companies that you've dealt with before. You've got a cost reimbursement contract, which involves payment to the seller for direct and indirect actual costs. Time and materials contract are a hybrid of both those fixed price and cost reimbursement contracts. And a unit pricing can also be used in various types of contracts to require the buyer to pay the supplier a predetermined amount per unit of service. If you want more detail, look at page 212. There are two types of documents we want to look at. The first one is called a request for proposal, and it's used to solicit a lot of proposals from a lot of prospective suppliers. A proposal is a document in which sellers describe what they want and what it will take to meet the requirements. Once a proposal has been accepted, in other words, you put out an RFP, you get back proposals from your suppliers, and then you choose one or two and you request for quote. It's used to actually get a little bit finer grained detail on what they're going to provide. It's also called a bid, and it's a document prepared for pricing standards and timing standards. You send out an RFP, you send out an RFQ, and once you accept one of those RFQs, you have a contract statement of work. In other words, what you've got then is an actual binding contract which describes the work that you're going to purchase from that supplier. It contains the scope, describes in a lot of detail what's expected. Remember that there's no such thing as project management without stakeholder management. What we're going to do is develop a plan that'll help us manage our communications with the stakeholders. So we're going to determine strategies in this plan to effectively engage stakeholders. Notice engage stakeholders in project decisions and activities based on their need, interests, and potential impact. Here's a review of the stakeholder management plan. What would you include in a stakeholder management plan? Well, you'd have current and desired engagement levels, which means how much they want to be involved, how much they want to have the participation in communication. You want the interrelationships between the stakeholders. In other words, some of them may be good friends, or they may have had a relationship in the past which has not been good, and you want to know all those things. You want to have their communication requirements. Some stakeholders will want to know every week what's going on. Some want to know every month. Some want to know by email. Some want a phone call. Some want a letter or a certain report. You also want a potential strategy for handling each one of them. Don't forget that this is the major part of project management. There's also methods for updating in this plan so that you can keep current with what's going on. Relationships are dynamic.